you very much and good evening. Assalamu alaikum. And it's a real pleasure again to join you on day 6 of your week in Ramadan. So what we're going to do today, first of all, I shall share my screen with you again. And and you should all be able to see my screen now. Okay, so I should share my screen with you over here. And what we're going to talk about over this next hour or so. I'm going to change it a little bit today. So I'm going to say a little bit, then we'll do something, and then we'll do something else, I guess. So far what we've been through, we've talked about good clinical practice, the principles of GCP. We've looked at the roles of the IRB and the IECs. We've looked at informed consent, and we've looked at safety as well. And then we also looked in quite a lot of detail at source documentation and essential documents. The question is, what are we actually testing? Well, that's the studied drug. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about what GCP says about the studied drug. And in GCP, we call it an investigational product, or IP for short. So an investigational product is the product under test. So a few objectives I have for you. First of all, I'll really tell you now how should IP, investigational product, and I'm going to call it IP from now on, should be managed in accordance with ICH GCP. And we'll talk about the importance of IP management, and very importantly, your role as researchers in managing investigational product. So like once again, we'll do a little bit of a recap. So if we go back to the principles of good clinical practice, Principle 2.12 states investigational products should be manufactured, handled, and stored in accordance with applicable good manufacturing practice, and they should be used in accordance with the approved protocol. So IPs should be manufactured, handled, and stored. So the manufacturing part is done with the sponsor company or the drug company, the biotech company who owns it. The way they're handled and stored when they're at your site must be in compliance with something we call GMP, or good manufacturing practice. What I'm going to talk to you about today is what GCP is saying about how to handle these drugs, how to store these drugs, which is very much in compliance with GMP. But the important point here is that all IP should be used in accordance with the approved protocol. So, let's start off then. So if we look at section 4.6 of the GCP guidelines under investigator obligations, this is where it tells you it tells you how to handle IP. So section 4.6 is IP management. And section 4.7 talks about randomization procedures and unblinding in studies that are using investigational products. So let's first of all start off with defining what we mean by an investigational product. And this is the GCP definition of an investigational product. It is a pharmaceutical form of an active ingredient or placebo being tested or used as a reference in a clinical trial, including a product with a marketing authorization when used or assembled, which by that we mean formulated or packaged in a different way from the approved form, or when used for an unapproved indication, or when used to gain further information about an approved drug. So basically, important thing here is an investigational product includes a placebo, if it's a placebo-controlled trial. It includes an unlicensed product, so these are drugs which have not been approved yet, and it includes drugs which are already on the market. So any kind of drug used in a clinical trial is called an IP, and this is the definition of IP. So IP, what do we do with IP? Well, ICH GCP section 4.6 states or says, as an investigator, you have a number of responsibilities. You are responsible for the IP accountability at the trial site. So what does IP accountability actually mean? Well, IP accountability means that When in a clinical trial, the sponsor company sends you a drug or the amount of drug, you then dispense this drug to the patient. Patient will return some drug maybe, and some will remain behind. All of these should be accounted for. We must be able, through documentation, be able to say where each and every aspect of the drug went, which was sent to the site. And I'll say more about that in a minute, and that is IP accountability. Now, the investigator may assign some or all duties to an appropriate pharmacist. Now, for example, IP could be many things, can be tablets, could be vials, could be infusions, could be anything. And sometimes they have to be made up in pharmacy. So what you can do when you're doing clinical research, we know that IP would be stored in pharmacy. It can be stored in pharmacy, and you can delegate your duty to the pharmacist. So pharmacist, you're going to dispense this drug. You're going to record all the accountability of the drug. But what's very, very important here is you are only delegating a task. You are ultimately responsible for what is happening to the investigational product. All investigational product should be maintained, and the records of the products, the delivery, the inventory, its use by the subjects, or if subjects didn't use it, they returned it back. When it's destroyed, there must be a documentation trail for all of this, because we have to know, this is a product in research, it's in a clinical trial. We want it to be only used in a clinical trial because that is what the principle of GCP said. So we have to account for it. And also, very importantly, it must be stored as specified by the sponsor. So how does this work? So when you start a clinical trial, obviously you'll get your IRB approval, and if needed, you get your regulatory approval. Now, if the drug, for example, is being manufactured from overseas, for example, it's coming from the US, Europe, or wherever, you need a license to import that drug in. And that is called an import license. Very, very important. So in some countries, the regulatory approval includes the import license, and in others, you have to apply for the import license. When you say you have to apply, not you personally, the responsibility of liaising with the regulatory authorities is the sponsor's responsibility. So the sponsor will do that. You and your obligations lie with reporting to your IRBs. That's your responsibility. So let's say what happens when we get study drugs, drug comes in. So what happens is when a study is being run, we can put it into three broad phases. You have a startup phase, and I'll come to the rest in a minute. So let's say during startup, so once the study is going to be started, now when can we actually start a study? Well, once we've got IRB approval, once we've got the regulatory approval. But in addition, we need lots of other things before we can start the study. To give you an example, some of the things we will need from investigators is you must have agreed on a contract with the sponsor. And this contract, for example, would be your terms and conditions that you follow GCP, etc. And in this contract, what we call the clinical trial agreement, there will be aspect of how much the sponsor will pay you for conducting this clinical trial. So we need that kind of information will be needed there. So we need that. We need you to have signed the protocol to agree that you're going to follow the protocol. Once all of this documentation we have, and I'm pretending I'm the sponsor now, the sponsor has in hand, they will send the study drug to you. So the drug will go to you. So it goes to the site. So what we call a hospital institution, wherever the clinical trial is going to be conducted, sometimes we call it a site. So this drug is shipped to your site. So during startup, drug goes to your site. Now what happens? And usually when it goes to the site, it will be stored in pharmacy or stored wherever it needs to be stored. Now, once the study is up and running, what happens to this IP? Very importantly, it has to be stored as per the protocol. So if the protocol says it has to be stored under certain conditions, it'll be stored there. It has to be stored in a safe and secure location. And this location should have restricted access. This is investigational product. We don't want this to be going missing or everybody have access to this. So restricting access, safe location. And what you will be doing here is during the active part of the study, you'll be maintaining lots of documents, lots of receipts, lots of forms, which I'm going to tell you about. So there's that documentation which needs to be completed. You will have temperature logs. So one thing very important is that ties in with the storage of the protocol of the IP. So what you will do is you will look in the protocol. In the protocol, it will tell you how should this IP be stored, and you follow those conditions. And you will only give the drug or dispense or prescribe the drug once the patient has given consent, they have signed the consent form. So what happens is the subject will enter the trial, there'll be a discussion with the subject, and the subject agrees. They will sign a consent form. Then all the pre-study assessments will be done, the screening assessments of the subject to get the baseline values. And if they meet the criteria of the protocol, then the subjects will be prescribed the study drug. Now, so that happens during the active part of the study. Now, what about during closeout? What happens when the study is finished? Well, when the study finishes, any drug that is remaining at site has to be destroyed. What happens? Either the sponsor will come and they'll do drug accountability, and they will be doing drug accountability throughout the clinical trial process. And once the study is finished, they'll remove the drug from the site and they'll take it for destruction. Or if the drug can be destroyed at your institution, we will allow it to be destroyed there. And I'll say more about that in a minute. So that's a simple flow of events. And in all through this flow of events, there's a documentation pathway, because this is going to be part of essential documents which we talked about yesterday. So what happens? Before the drug is shipped to the site, you get a call from the sponsor saying, we are going to ship drug to the site and it will come on this day and on this time, even if they're so precise. Okay? So somebody has to be available to receive that drug, maybe somebody in pharmacy. So if there's that person in pharmacy who's going to receive it, you have to ensure that this pharmacist knows there's a clinical research on, that there's a clinical trial. They understand the clinical trial. They're trained on the clinical trial protocol. And I'll say more about this tomorrow as part of your obligations. They will do that. So they should be available to receive the drug. Once they get the drug, it'll be in a box or it'll be however, they will open it and they will check, has this been damaged in any way? And what you will see is in the box, there'll be a form which says how much drug has been sent, what boxes there are. They count that to make sure that that's what's on the form. If there are any discrepancies, then these have to be reported to the sponsor, because we're doing drug accountability here. Once the drug is at the site, you and the pharmacist or whoever will store it as the protocol is telling you to store the drug. Now, this form I said you receive, which comes part of the initial shipment, is called an IP shipment form. So what will happen is whoever is receiving this form will check the content of the form, check the content of the IP, and if it's correct, they'll sign it and fax it to the sponsor or email, whatever the sponsor is saying, the procedure they want you to follow. And then that is confirming we've got the drug you said you've sent to us. Now, storage. The IP must be stored as per the protocol instructions. There's another document which will tell you how to store the investigational product, and that's called the investigator's brochure. And if you remember, I told you this was one document which contains all the information you need to know about any IP. So you read that. And if it says this should be stored at a certain temperature, like minus 20 degrees or whatever, you have to make sure you have a freezer that will keep it there. If it says it has to be stored at room temperature, now room temperature in UK is very different to room temperature in the Middle East, I guess. Here our room temperature is probably about 18 degrees, and I think it may be a bit higher in the summer in the Middle East, gets very, very hot. So you have to see if this says room temperature, if room temperature is 18 to 25 degrees, you have to make sure there's air conditioning or whatever in the room, which keeps that room within that temperature range. And to ensure that that happens, you have to keep a thermometer. So there must be a thermometer somewhere that is recording the temperature. And what you will have to do is create a temperature log and log the temperature. What happens is that depending on the protocol and the sponsor, they will tell you how frequently they want the measurements. Is it every 24 hours? Is it twice a day? Whatever, you just go and log the temperature. That becomes an essential document. So that's called a temperature log. So all instructions have to be followed. Oh, that's the temperature log I was saying, yeah? And another thing is they must be stored in a safe and secure location with restricted access. Now, what happens is before the study would start, the sponsor will come and do something they call a pre-study visit or a site selection visit. And what they do is they'll come to you, they will initially contact you first saying, look, we've got a clinical trial, would you be interested? And if you say, yes, I'm interested, they will come and visit you. They will come and do an assessment of your site. They'll talk to you. They'll say, are you interested in the study? Do you have any issues with the protocol, for example? And then they'll go around your hospital and look at the facilities there. Do you have the facilities to conduct the clinical research? So if, for example, it's an oncology trial and you need MRIs done, do you have an MRI machine, for example? And one place they will go, one thing they will look at, and that is the pharmacy. They'll ask you, where is the drug being stored? And you say, go to the pharmacy. They'll go to the pharmacy and they will check in pharmacy, where will you keep this drug? Who has access to the door in pharmacy? Who can come in? Is it restricted? And those kind of questions. Everything I'm telling you here is coming out of section 4.6 of the GCP guidelines. They're clearly stating IP should be stored in a safe, secure location with restricted access. Now, we come to, so IP stored, so the study starts, this drug is sent to your site, it's checked that the right amount has been sent, and then it is stored. And then it comes to IP dispensing. So what happens is, you're starting screening patients, you're doing their consent, you're doing their the screening assessments. Do they meet the inclusion criteria, the exclusion criteria of the protocol? And if they do, then they're formally in the clinical trial, and then they can start prescribing or dispense the study drug or the IP. Now what happens? Very importantly, only appropriate personnel should dispense the drug that is done in accordance with the protocol. So we need to ensure that whoever is dispensing the drug is appropriately qualified and trained to do that. So, and pharmacists usually are. But if, for example, it's a very complicated drug mixing process, yes, the pharmacists are capable of doing it. The sponsor will train them. They'll make sure they train them and they understand how to do this. And all of this training is going to be documented. And tomorrow I'll say a little bit more about that. So only appropriate personnel will dispense the study drug. Okay? And then what we'll do is we will make sure that as the drug is being dispensed and the study is running, we are completing some forms called drug accountability forms. So basically what these forms are a log of the subject, how much drug was given to them, and at what dose it was given to them, and if they came back, did they bring any back? So say, for example, if it is tablets, bottles of tablets, yes, and there are 100 tablets in the bottle, and they're supposed to take 3 a day or whatever, we dispense them. Once they finish the bottle, in a clinical trial, we will tell them not to throw the bottle away, just bring it back. Even if it's empty, bring it back. Yeah? You'll bring it back and the pharmacist will keep it until the sponsor's monitor has come and checked that that subject's drug bottle was brought back. So if, for example, there are little vials as well, for example, we would keep them until the sponsor comes and has a look and destroys them, or whatever the procedure has been documented in the protocol. So these drug accountability forms are basic mathematics. How much drug was prescribed to the patient? How much did they take? And how much did they return? Simple mathematics, it should all add up. We should be able to tell them that, yes, the patient was taking the right number of tablets or whatever. Yeah. Now, Once we're doing all of this, the study is happily going along, and we come to the end of the clinical trial. So at the end of the study, the IP at the site has to be destroyed. We'll take it all away. We don't need it over there. Okay? And what happens is the sponsor will tell you how they will do this. If, for example, you say, our institution has the facilities to destroy drugs, which is fine, the sponsor will say, okay, can I see the standard operating procedure or the SOP for this? And that has to be filed. As an investigator, you have an investigator file. What happens is the sponsor will give a pharmacy a file, and they call it the pharmacy file. When the study ends, the pharmacy file is really part of the investigator file. It can be considered as one. Yeah. So everything will be filed in this pharmacy file. And if the drugs are going to be destroyed at the local institution, the SOP must be followed. All destruction must be documented. So for example, if it said we have 15 bottles that need to be destroyed, we need to see a form which says that 15 bottles were sent for destruction, and we'll send it to the destruction, to your destruction unit or whatever. Yeah. As you can see, there's a lot of documentation involved. Okay? And the type of documentation we have are shipping forms and receipt forms, shipping the drug to you. Now, when the study is running, what the sponsor will do, they won't send you lots and lots of drug. Yeah? They'll send you drug in phases. So the amount you need, they will send you. Then if you want more, they will send you more. So as an investigator, you have to really start thinking now, how is my recruitment going? How much IP is there in pharmacy? If I think within the next 2 weeks, I'm going to recruit 10 patients, is there enough IP in pharmacy for 10 patients? If not, you tell the sponsor, look, I think I need more drug, and they will send it to you. And when they send it to you, they send it to you with another form, that this is how much we've sent. Again, you check the form, check the bottles, sign the form, send the form, file the form. And the monitor will come and they will check all of these things. So that is what is happening constantly. Okay. Temperature logs, very, very important. You will keep temperature logs. You will have a thermometer in the freezer, in the room, wherever it's required, and you have to ensure that the temperature stays within the range of what the IP requirements are. For example, when we're doing vaccine trials or very drugs that are very sensitive to temperature, which have to be frozen, the institutions have big freezers where they will keep them. And what they do is they actually have alarms on the freezers. So if, for example, the temperature falls below a certain value, the pharmacist is alarmed that the temperature is going down. This is really good practice, and I think it's part of standard practice in a lot of institutions. So you have temperature logs. I've talked about IP accountability logs. You will have these logs which document the amount of drug which is being prescribed to each subject in the research. All of these forms, all of the logs, the sponsor will create for you and give them to you. All you need to do is fill them in. That's all that's required. And then obviously you have the final log, which is the return and the destruction form. So this is the type of documentation that's required, and it's very, very important because we have to ensure that the drug which was used in the study was sent to you was only used for the study, and we can account for it. We know exactly how many subjects were taking this and what they were taking. So what happens? The sponsor, I mentioned the sponsor does something. So the sponsor, the pharma or the biotech company are always coming in and they are monitoring. And if you remember from yesterday, I told you what monitoring was in the source documentation, the lecture. So they will be monitoring, and one thing they will monitor is what is happening at pharmacy. Okay. So what do? Well, this is a general flow of the IP handling. The sponsor will ship the drug to you. You will receive it, you will store it. And the subjects, it'll be dispensed to the subjects. And the subjects will return unused IP. But it's very, very important here is when IP is being dispensed to the subjects, you have to tell them how this should be taken. That's very, very important. and they should follow the instructions that, yes, this is how we're taking this. So when your pharmacist has a discussion with them, they should explain to them, this is how drugs should be taken. When you're doing informed consent procedures with them, you explain to them that this is how the drug will be administered to you. And if it's something they have to, it's an intranasal spray or whatever, they have to take it home. You know, you insert it in your nose, you will squeeze, you will breathe, or whatever. All of this has to be explained to them. So what do these monitors actually do? So what are these monitors which are coming from the sponsors? What are they doing? Well, they're going to review your IP accountability records. They will look at every receipt that was sent. They will look at every drug accountability log. And if there is drug which cannot be accounted for, we need to know what happened to it. Where did it go? Yeah. Now, can this happen in real life? Yes, it can happen. Sometimes when the pharmacists are in the fumigation cabinet, they're putting drugs. Sometimes some of them can slip on the floor, some can fall. If that happens, you have to document that 2 were lost during dispensing or whatever, fell on the floor or whatever. We also want to know from the subjects, did you take the drugs when you were supposed to take them? And if, for example, they returned with some drugs and they said, oh, I can't remember which dose I missed, we just document that. We have to document this. Okay? So they will look at that. So the monitor will also want to make sure that there's proper storage. They will check the thermometers, they'll look at the thermometer log over all the days, and they will see, was it within the time range, within the temperature range that the protocol said. So they will look at that. They will also, speak to the pharmacist. They will speak to you as a researcher, as an investigator. Who is dispensing these drugs? Who is dispensing them? Were they trained, etc.? They'll ask these questions. Now, if it's a randomized study or a blinded study, what usually happens, sometimes you will get random codes at the site, which allow you to break the code in an emergency for whatever reason. Yeah, they will make sure that these codes are not being broken unnecessarily. The purpose of blinding a study is to introduce bias in a clinical trial. As soon as you unblind a subject, you start introducing bias. Unblinding of a subject can only be undertaken according to what the protocol is saying. So you have to look at the protocol and say, when am I allowed to break the blind for a specific patient? So they'll make sure you're following those. Now, as I said, that you have to ensure that you have enough IP at the site to do your projection of your patients coming in. They will come and they will check, do you have sufficient supply of IP at the site? So they will check that. They'll see how many bottles have you got left, how much drug have you got left. They look at how many patients are on the study at the moment. How many more visits do they have? How long are they going to be in the study? And then they'll say, you know what? I think you need more drug. I am going to send you more drug. So they will really, really look at that as well. And what they'll do is, as for example, subjects, the study is running, they won't wait till the end of the study to destroy or remove some of the unused drug. If need be, they will, at an interim basis, if the drug's being returned, there's unused, they will remove them from the site to make sure everything is very nice and clear. Yeah. So they will do that. So something very important they will look at. What we really want to make sure is when we're doing our research is that this drug is only being used for the clinical trial. So it's nice at your institution, you have a special place in the pharmacy for clinical trial medication only. What's very nice is to label shelves, unused drug, used drug, making sure they're not being mixed up in any way whatsoever. So now randomization code breaks, I'll just mention these to you. Now what happens is sometimes we have a coding system. There's a random code. So if it's a trial with 2 different arms in it, A and B, there's randomly people will be assigned to either treatment. Yeah, you have that. So sometimes the drug will get subject may get treatment A and the other subject might get treatment B, but we don't know what A or B is. Okay. Now what happens sometimes you may need to break this randomization code. And that could be for the safety of the patient. Something's happened to the patient and you want to know what drug they were on because I need to treat them. Then if the protocol allows it, you can break the blind. Sometimes it's a paper, sometimes you have to call it's electronically done or whatever. If that happens, you're allowed to break the blind to only in the interest of the patient. But what's very, very important is the code must only be broken in accordance with the protocol. So if it's a randomized study, it's a blinded study, then in the protocol, it'll clearly state this is when you will break the blind. And it could be a safety issue, whatever, but they say you can break the blind. Okay. If you do any premature unblinding, or you by mistake you open the blind, you must promptly document this and explain why you did this, because the sponsor would need to know why you did this, because this starts introducing bias into the clinical trial. And again, stated directly from ICH GCP. Okay. Now, ICH GCP, that's what it really says about investigational products itself. Fairly straightforward, but very, very important, because this is the product you are testing. Without being able to fully account and give us the evidence that these drugs were given at the right dose, we cannot make any claim for our protocols, for our drugs. So it's very, very important, this IP accountability. Usually the investigator at the site will delegate this. They will delegate this task to the pharmacist, which is okay, the pharmacist can do it. But the investigator must be providing oversight to this and making sure the pharmacist is acting in accordance with the protocol, and all of this is being done with the protocol. Something else as investigators, when you are looking at these, is you look at the shelf life of the IP as well, and the monitor does that. We look at the shelf life. How long will these drugs get expired, or are they expiring? If so, expired drug cannot be dispensed to any subjects. So that is all. It's quite a short bit, but very, very important is IP management. Okay. I hope now I've given you a little bit of an overview of how IP should be managed according to GCP, and the importance of good IP management. Very, very importantly, mathematics simple. We must be able to account for every item of IP. Okay, so that's all I was going to say about IP. So before we go to any questions, I am going to pose some questions to you. So I know for the past 5 lectures, there's a lot we have done. And tomorrow we've got a final lecture. And to prepare us for a final lecture and to prepare us for a test after the lecture, I want to pose some questions to you. Okay? And I'm going to pose this. Oops, okay, can you all see me still? Okay. I'm going to pose these questions to you. And I'd be happy for anybody who would like to share their thoughts with us, to share your thoughts with us. So the first question is here. Okay. So you are participating as an investigator in a phase 3 migraine trial. You have a potential subject whom you would like to recruit into the clinical trial. The patient is a migraine sufferer and is in excruciating pain. She says her head is about to explode, but she's agreeing to be part of the study and is ready to sign the consent form. So my question is, would you put this individual in that clinical trial? If so, why? If not, why not? That's my question to you all. So if anybody is willing to have a go at this, I'd be more than happy to hear about this. So shall I share my screen again? So please don't be shy. So here's the question again. So here's the question. I want you to think back, think GCP, think what's ethical. Would you, in your opinion, you're an investigator, patient comes to you doing a migraine trial, patient's coming to you in a lot of pain, saying, yes, I want to be in the trial. Would you put them in the trial? would you get them to sign the consent form and say, yes, you can go in the clinical trial? Oh my goodness. Is anybody brave enough to share their thoughts with us?
Mr. Ahmed, are you around to allow them to raise their hands?
Oh yes, we need hands raised, don't we?
I think Mr. Ahmed has to allow them. Just a moment, please.
Yes, sir. Who need to join us?
Thank you.
They will join voice or by chat?
They can either, it's whoever is willing to raise their hand and they want to speak and share their thoughts with us. I would very much welcome that.
Chat is open now. They can ask by chat.
Now, it's a question I've posed to them, and I would like their view on this.
Okay, okay. I'm sorry. I misunderstand. Dr. Sharif? Dr. Sharif?
Hello. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
We hear you. Go ahead.
From my point of view, and according to my understanding, and the main concept is benefit-risk ratio. I think this is one of the main concepts for a good clinical practice. So for this patient, I think the benefits will outweigh the risk according to the situation of this patient. This is my thought.
Okay, and you would include the patient in the trial? Yes?
I think so.
Okay,
Yes.
That's what.
Do you have any idea about the trial itself? What is it concerning, or?
The trial is about migraine, and the patient is already a migraine patient, and according to the profile, she is not controlling its migraine status. So I think the benefits will outweigh the risk.
Okay, perfect. So what does anybody disagree with that? Does anybody disagree with Dr. Sharif?
Okay, I will enable Dr. Rahab to join us.
Does Dr. Rahab, do you agree or disagree with Dr. Sharif?
Dr. Rahab? Okay, we will go Dr. Rahab. Your microphone is unmute. Okay, we have Dr. Muhammad Ahmed. Dr. Muhammad?
Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I believe it's not a matter of agreement or disagreement. Yes, as a broad answer, it's a benefit versus risk ratio, but the exact answer is that it's a specialist judgment. If involving the patient in the trial would harm the patient progress of treatment regarding her situation, then the patient would not be included in the study. But if this would help her, that I believe my investigational product would help her, and at any point I can intervene and get her excluded from the study, then I will include her in the study. So according to the patient benefit, by my own judgment as a specialist in this matter.
Okay. All right, good point. And let's look at it from the perspective of GCP now.
We have more, Dr.Naeem. Are you interested to ask most of them to join us this point?
Yeah, does anybody want to add another point? Because I might be happy.
We have Dr. Hamida.
Yes, Dr. Hamida.
Dr. Hamida.
Okay, hello, yes?
Yes.
What I am understand from this case that we should tell the sponsor, yeah, for what happened for this patient.
Okay, all right. Okay, I think it's actually a little bit simpler than that. So the thing here is, the question is this informed consent? Okay, remember I said informed consent is a process where the subject is going to make an informed decision. Now let's think about this from this perspective now. The subject may meet all the criteria. This might be the right study, so I agree with what you've said. But the question is, did they make the informed decision? She's in so much pain. She's saying her head is about to explode. And think about it. When we're in pain, we say, I don't care what you give me, I'll take it. Take away the pain. That's not me truly making an informed decision. As a subject, have I thought about this? That's what it is. To me, she's under maybe a lot of pain. And when you're in pain, you can't make that decision really, that I made an informed decision. So my advice here would be to this person is, she's saying my head is exploding, I'll do it. Well, you haven't had even time to think yourself of the benefits, the risks. Think about this before you make the decision. So what I would do, because migraine is not a life-threatening condition, really, I would tell this subject is, you know what? Here's a consent form. Go home. Once your episode of migraine has gone and you're in a better frame of mind to think logically, come back to me and we will discuss this. And that would be more of an informed decision. So let's say, for example, we break our legs, we're in pain. You don't care, just give me an anesthetic to get rid of the pain. I don't care what it is. Yes, we will say that. So we don't really think ourselves about the risk benefit. So that does kind of make a little bit of sense. It's going really bit back to the ethics and putting the subject first here. Are you actually knowing what you're putting yourself into? Because this is an experimental drug. It's research. We are still trying to prove it works. We're still trying to show that this drug is safe. Therefore, we would make that extra caution and make sure that you understand before you agree to do this. So something to think about. So what I'll do now is I'll go to the next question. Something totally different. Okay. Source document. So all of you should know this. We did this yesterday. Easy one. An investigator measures a patient's blood pressure using a mercury sphygmomanometer and enters the result into the case report form. What is the source document? Anybody can just say it. What is the source document?
Raise your hand, please, if you have the answer. Dr. Wael Muluk. Okay, Dr. Wael, go ahead. Very fast, please.
I think in this case it's the CRF already. Because the sphygmomanometer mercury is not something to take it in my hand or to keep it fixed.
Excellent, excellent, good. How about this? An investigator measures a patient's blood pressure using a mercury sphygmomanometer, then enters the result into the CRF. This is then transcribed later into the patient's notes. What is the source document?
We have case? Dr. Omar. Dr. Omar?
It is still the CRF as it is the original records.
Fantastic, excellent, great. Yep, it's still the CRF. Although the medical notes are source documents, it wasn't written there in the first place. And as Dr. Omar said, it's the original. How about next one? An investigator measures a patient's blood pressure using an electronic sphygmomanometer and gets a printout, then enters the results into the patient notes. This is then transcribed later into the CRF. What is the source document here?
We have Dr. Noora Rukban.
Dr. Noora? What would be the source document here?
In this case, I think it's from the patient's note.
So you think it's the patient's notes? Okay, so let's...
Either patient's notes or from the electronic sphygmomanometer, not from the CRF.
Okay, right. I think I got you. The line broke up a little bit. It's definitely not the CRF. You're right. That's not. Now the question is it the patient notes? Where is the first kind of documentation of this measurement? It's the printout, yes? Remember I said source documents can be electronic printouts. So the source document in this case is actually the printout. The printout is the source because that's the original place where that data point was being presented. So that printout cannot be thrown away. That printout has to stay as part of the medical records. So just I hope that makes sense. It's just the first place where a data point was being presented. Now, sometimes things like printouts from machines, there's usually on heat-sensitive paper, and over time these papers fade. The heat-sensitive paper fades, and you can't see it. Yeah. And remember, yesterday I said essential documents need to be stored for at least 2 years after the last marketing, blah blah blah, a long time. So obviously these will fade over the long time. We don't want them to fade. So what we do is if we have documents which we know are on heat sensitive paper, which will fade, take a photocopy of them, attach the photocopy to the original, and sign and date the photocopy to say that this is a certified version of the original, and you keep them both. That's what you'll do. This is the level of accuracy we want to ensure we are producing when we're doing research. So this is clinical research. Okay, last one. An investigator measures a patient's blood pressure using a mercury sphygmon manometer, writes the result on a yellow post-it note, enters the results into the CRF. This is then transcribed later into the patient notes. What is the source document here?
Okay, we have many names raising their hand, but we will give the chance to Dr. Elna.
Dr. Elna?
Dr. Elna, please unmute the microphone. Dr. Elna. Okay. We have Dr. Maysoon. Dr. Maysoon?
Dr. Maysoon?
Yes, yes, I'm hearing you.
Yes, go ahead.
I think it's the CRF.
You think it's a CRF? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. So where, remember, source documents is where the original value, where was the original?
The yellow, it's the yellow post-it, but it's not the official one.
No, it is, because the first place where something is written becomes the original source document. So the yellow post-it is the source document. So if you wrote this on the yellow post-it, you shouldn't throw the yellow post-it away. Stick it in the medical records, because that is going for accurate data. So in this case, it would actually be the post-it note. Therefore, good practice is whenever you're seeing patients, write everything directly. Have the medical records with you. Write anything in the medical records, not on loose pieces of paper here and there. Yeah? So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Last question, very tricky here. A patient enrolled in an epilepsy study comes into your clinic for a routine study 3 visit. The patient informed the study nurse that she took the tablets as per the instructions. However, the tablets smelled like rotten fish and tasted like stale cheese. Oh, what do you think is happening here? That's what I'd like you to know. So I want you to put everything together from everything we've done so far. Any thoughts from anybody here? Remember, when you have issues at your site or problems, as an investigator, you have to get to the root of these problems. What will you do? What do you think has happened here?
Dr. Ahmed Al-Sayed Al-Shafi'i.
Dr. Ahmed?
Please unmute your microphone, please. Dr. Ahmed Al-Sayed.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, yeah. I think this IP is expired, and I think we have to make incident report of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how would you know if the IP is expired?
I will check. I will ask the patient to bring the amount of drug with them.
Fantastic.
To check the drug.
The expiration date, yes.
Yes, and I will check the.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, I will check the. Yeah, I will check the sample with the patient if it's expired or not, and to be sure that this is expired, or the patient have some visual or smell hallucinations. I have to differentiate between both.
Very good. That's very, very good. Okay, I like it. Okay, so what if, so how would you know that the patient has maybe some sensory changes? How would you know that? Where would you look? What documents would you look at to get that information?
We have Dr. Haitham. He would like to contribute to this question. Dr. Haitham Al-Ammar.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yes.
Actually, I want to just to add on top of the what doctor said. First of all, to answer your question, how would we investigate if it was a failure or there is a hallucination or not, we have to check with other reports. Is there any other reporting to this same incident or not?
Very good.
I would like also to add if there is any failure in the chain of supply, like if there is any failure in storage, transport. Some of them are the heat or cold sensitive, so we also have to check all of that.
Excellent, excellent. I think you've all hit the points there very, very well. So we've got two potential options here. First thing I'd ask myself, and you're right, and the previous doctor said as well, you know, has this drug expired? So I'd ask my patient, you know, have you been
hit all the points?
Yeah, have you been storing the drug as you know, as I told you to, for example, don't keep them in the hot weather or whatever. Have you been doing that? That could be one thing. So that's, let's say the patient says, you know, I've been storing them properly, you know. Then the question is, has the hallucinations or, you know, has the sensories changed? Or is this characteristic of the drug? So you would look in the document called the investigator's brochure, which contains all the information about the study drug, and you look in the protocol. What does it say are the physiochemical properties of the drug? And if it says the drug actually has got a very bad smell and it has a strange taste, then there's nothing wrong with the drug. But what if we look in there and we know the drug is not expired, and we also see that this is not characteristic of the drug, what do we have here then? What do we have here?
Raise your hand. Dr. Maysoon also, she need to contribute?
Yes, please, Dr. Maysoon.
Yes, Dr. Maysoon. Dr. Maysoon?
Yeah. Hello.
Yes.
We should look for the previous medical records of the patients if she has episodes of epilepsy associated with sensory changes.
Okay, very good. Yes, we'll look at that. And even if she does, yeah, that's very, very good. But let's just say this is a sensory change. So what do we have here then? What do we call this?
We have Dr. Fahd Al-Shehri.
So something I talked about in safety.
Dr. Fahd, unmute your microphone, please. Dr. Fahd? Dr. Fahd? Okay, Dr. Jamila.
Yes, Dr. Jamila, then I'll give you my thoughts as to what it is.
Dr. Jamila.
Hello?
Yes,
Hi.
doctor.
Yes, this would be recorded as adverse event.
Fantastic. Exactly. Now, how many adverse events are here? Is it one or two? And what are they? Very good. That's excellent, what I was looking for.
I think it is two adverse events.
Yeah, what would you
smell of the, yes, it is the smell of rotten fish. And yes, it is the sense of the patient. That's the mean that, yes.
Fantastic. Totally agree with you. So here we've got potentially two adverse events. One is change in taste. You can just document that, change in taste. And
yes, and the change in the smell.
So here we've got potentially two adverse events. So we need to look at the other documents which are around the IB protocol, etc. And then we come to a conclusion, this is what the issue is. So fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Jamil. That was very, very excellent. Great. Okay. So that was just a nice little, I thought I'd change it a little bit here and just do a little recap. So what I do now is just leave the floor. We've got about 5 more minutes. So maybe open this up for questions and I shall stop sharing my screen.